Welcome to this latest edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Cassidy Jo Fortin. For almost half a century, one man has dedicated his life to making others strong by building up the sport of weightlifting. Today we have with us Team USA Weightlifting coach and 2010 Powerlifting Hall of Fame inductee, Danny McDermott. Thank you for joining us today, Danny.
Well, thank you for having me, Cassidy. I appreciate being here.
Oh, we're really excited. How about we get started with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, a lot of people think my full-time job is weightlifting and weightlifting-related projects and activities. Actually, it's not. I'm a financial advisor by trade. My involvement today is I hold a little gym out here in Anaheim that we train athletes in high-performance sport. A lot of them are, start out with weightlifting. It's a good sport that translates to the other sports that you see on high schools and colleges and professional levels. Would be football, track and field, basketball, baseball, you pretty much name it. Weightlifting training that we do, snatch, clean, and jerk, is something that can be related to most sports for their weightlifting disciplines that they use to perform better.
Very cool. And how did you first get involved in weightlifting?
That's the interesting story. Okay, being a child of 7 children, the youngest of the boys, you had to kind of survive, if you will. So as I was going into high school, before that I was always fascinated with strongmen and bodybuilders. They had a TV show, Dave Draper, I'm sure nobody's heard that name before, but he's a famous bodybuilder back then. They had a TV show called The Gladiator that came on. He's a big, strong guy and things like that. I was always fascinated with it. I was looking at my little wimpy body, I probably 120 pounds soaking wet. And so as most kids, you want to play sport in high school, which I did. I went and played football. And it wasn't very big, and so I took on the weight training before I got in high school. At home, we had the old Sears set, or the funny thing was you have these your dad would make a barbell with 2 cans with cement in it. That was your barbell in the backyard. So that's how I got kind of started. Later to come out is in 1969, I grew up in Whittier, and I went to school at a high school called Cantwell High School. It was an all-boy Catholic school in Montebello, California. So I took the bus every day. Coming home on the bus after spring practice, 1969, I remember the day like it was yesterday. I saw this big glass building there, or a glass, front on Whittier Boulevard, and I saw all these weight equipment in there. I got off the bus stop, ran back. I was so fascinated. So I joined the gym that day. In fact, the guy hired me for $1 an hour. And so I came back the next day. My job was working a jackhammer. We're going to build a steam room. So it got broken. Child labor, yes, okay. But anyway, that was my choice. So from there, I got interested in weight training. I was weight training for my football and track and field, which I ran. And by the time I was a junior in high school, it was quite obvious to me, hey, USC is not looking for a 5'6", running back. So I thought I'll stick with bodybuilding. So I started competing in bodybuilding competitions as a teenager and did quite well. Lifted for many years after that. Once I got out of school, and was no longer a teenager, a little bit of a hiatus, and then I went into powerlifting, which took up most of the time. In powerlifting, I became one of the better bench pressers in the world, ranked number 3 in my weight class, held 2 state records, was actually the California chairman for powerlifting for a while there as well. I held one of the national championships in Inglewood, California, which brought a huge number of people. It's amazing how in the summertime, if you have a championship out here in California, everybody wants to come for obvious reasons. So that was really quite an experience. Later on, retired out of bodybuilding. Powerlifting, and got back into bodybuilding. But it was really interesting. When I talk to youngsters today, they said, what were the gyms like back in 1969? I said, believe it or not, it was against the health codes in 1969 and most of the 70s to have a co-ed gym. You could have men and women train. That was fine. That was cool. You can do it all you want, but they could not train together. So that was a big difference when they started, making more co-ed. People said, well, how do you train with your wife and things like that? Well, you couldn't. Your wife had to come at one time, or your girlfriend, you had to come at a different time. So that's kind of how we evolved since then. There weren't really many commercial gyms at the time. There were Vic Tanny's and things like that. That's another name most people never heard of. Or even Jack LaLanne gyms. If you look Jack LaLanne up, most people haven't heard of him either. But these were really the pioneers of what we know in fitness today. If people were to ask me, I said, it goes back to the 50s, and even beyond that, even further back. But as far as in recent history, weight training and strongman and things like this, it's been going on for years and years and years. Strongman is really where most weightlifting evolved from, and powerlifting is a good example of that. In the 50s, you'd go down to Muscle Beach, and they'd have odd lift competitions and things like that. And what happened with the odd lift competitions, before you know it, that became powerlifting, as we know it today. So there's a lot in history with what weight training is today and what it was before, and why are we here today? And if people want to really dig into the history of it, it's quite interesting.
Well, it seems like you've been involved in it for a really long time. Are there any other differences necessarily from what it was then and what it is now?
That's a good question, and let me address that. If you have to think back, I'll give you an example. 1969, this gym was pretty well put together. But if you walked in that gym today, you would think it's a dump, because the way the equipment was, the way people trained was so radically different. For example, you go to gyms today, people just leave their stuff all over the gym. They drop the dumbbells and everything else. Back in 1969 or the 70s, they'd throw you out of the gym. So when you put a dumbbell down, you had to bring it down the same way you got it up. So just your overall strength, and people don't believe that, but your overall strength increases when you do things like that, because you have to manage weights in more different oddball ways. There were no machines. We had some cable machines and things like that, but not like today. It was all barbells and dumbbells and platforms and squat racks and things like this. And that was it. In fact, the weightlifting, people see the big bumper plates today that they could drop on the floor. Couldn't back then. You had to bring it down the same way you brought it up. And that builds a lot of core strength when you do that.
Yeah. So what is your connection to CSU Fullerton, and how does your work influence college students?
What I like to see today, one thing about my background that I should probably bring up, why I'm pretty passionate about this. When I was going to college, people thought I went there to kinesiology. No part of it. I wanted to be a geologist. So I was going to college to become a geologist, and that was my major. And unfortunately, both my parents died within 5 days apart. And so, back then you have a family tragedy. You stop everything you're doing and you go to help your family. I had 2 younger sisters I had to help raise. So I dropped out of college to help my family, got into the business I'm in today, which, don't regret doing that at all. But it's unfortunate I couldn't finish my degree, which I really wanted to do. Having said that, today, USA Weightlifting has become so organized in some degrees. There are certain colleges throughout the nation that actually offer scholarships for weightlifting. My son was a recipient of one of them. He went to Louisiana State University in Shreveport, Louisiana, and he got his degree.
It's very impressive.
And so I looked back then and I said, you know what? I wish they had something like that, when I was his age. I probably would have got my degree because I would have had the financial assistance to help me get there. So I look at that day and say, if nothing else, what I would like to do is help promote these students that want to get involved in weightlifting, whether they get a scholarship or not, but let them enjoy it, because how and when you're introduced to weight training makes a difference for the rest of your life, period. It becomes your lifestyle. And if you can get an education out of it as well, more power to you.
Very cool. So apart from being involved at CSU Fullerton, you're also involved with Team USA Weightlifting. What sort of work do you do?
Well, with Team USA Weightlifting, they don't hire us as employees. We go bankrupt, I guess. But what happens is, as a registered coach for USA Weightlifting, what I do is I have my club, Team Southern California, right here in Anaheim, and we bring members in, and some of the members they want to compete, some don't, but I usually get them all talked into competing just to try it out once. And then from your club level, you develop athletes. I like to bring them in really young if I can, because of the statement I just made. I want to make sure they're introduced to weight training properly as a long-term athletic development program and not a microwave system, because there are no shortcuts. If there's shortcuts, it's probably going to kill you, which we can discuss that a little bit later. But, as long as you teach them how to, train properly, eat properly, rest properly, and understand this is not a short process, it's a long-term endeavor you need to go through, and you got to be patient, you got to be consistent, and you got to be committed to it. It becomes your lifestyle.
Very nice. Now, earlier you talked about being involved in powerlifting, bodybuilding, and weightlifting. What are the difference between these three?
Well, let me first start by saying this, because I always get asked this question. You know, this is a good question. Which one's the most difficult? Hands down, bodybuilding.
Okay.
Because bodybuilding, everything you do makes a difference.
Okay.
Now, for example, when you're getting ready for a bodybuilding competition, you're training in that gym. You don't know what your competition looks like. All you know is you got to look the best you could possibly be and hope it's good enough. Mm-hmm. And the diet regimen, the training regimen, the posing regimen, I mean, everything you do all day long is geared towards bodybuilding while trying to hold down a full-time job. Powerlifting is, it's not for the weak of heart or weak of body. It's, you put a lot of stress on your system. So do you in weightlifting. But the way you train a powerlifter as opposed to a weightlifter is radically different. A powerlifter, you need to get stronger, and you got to have good technique. But if you want to talk about what takes technique and the strength put together, it's clearly weightlifting. Okay. Because think of weightlifting as like the gymnastics of a barbell sport. Because what you're doing is you're manipulating your body around a barbell while that barbell's in flight.
Okay.
And powerlifting, you just grab that thing and give it your all. So that's kind of the difference. Mm-hmm. They're all very good sports. I don't favor one over the other one. I love them all. When I train people, I combine all disciplines together to fully complete their physiques, their strength, their body, mm-hmm. and their ability.
Very nice. What do you see in the future of weightlifting for the United States?
Well, it's what I see and what I would like to see. Mm-hmm. Now, what I would like us to do, if I could see this someday, is promote more weightlifting at a younger age. Because a lot of people have these misconceptions. And one of them is, well, it'll stunt his growth. Well, okay, I'm 5'6", but that's not why. We're all short in the McDermott family. So it has nothing to do with it. What they need to do is they got to understand, how do you train the kids younger? What's it going to do for them? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages if you do it wrong? And if we can get people educated in this, it'll be far better. Because if you take them young, what you're doing is you're teaching them technique. As a matter of fact, what we do now for the little kids, we actually have competitions now. It's not how much did you lift, it's how well did you lift it. Okay. So now it becomes like gymnastics. Mm-hmm. On that platform, you start with 10 points. For a little mistake, you shave it down a little bit. Mm-hmm. We don't care how much you lifted, how well. Now, if you can take that same discipline and carry that through for the rest of their life, when it really matters the most, they will be good. Mm-hmm. If you look at a lot of the European models, they don't have these kids coming in lifting weights. They're on a PVC pipe, mm-hmm. or pretty much like a broomstick for the first couple of years, just learning the technique. And then they can go ahead and adapt and start putting some load on it then. But we do it backwards in the United States of America. We need to understand that technique is everything, strength will come later.
Okay.
And if we can do that, we'll be a lot better. So that's what I would like to see, a youth program to develop for the years later.
That's really cool. And how can the fundamentals taught in weightlifting be transferable to other sports or to life in general?
Discipline. Mm-hmm. Discipline, commitment, and everything else. Everything that you want to do in life, in business or anything else, because also something about weightlifting too. You are not always going to be getting better and better all the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're going to go out there and you are going to fail. Well, it's easier to quit, but it's hard to pursue through that. So that's what it teaches right there, that it's not going to be my way all the time, and as you fail, you go back to the drawing board and you go back and attack it again, the proper way, of course. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it does. It also teaches you a lot of good health management for yourself, because let's face it, if you're not healthy, you can't do anything. Right. Business, school, I don't care what it is. You got to stay healthy.
Very nice. Mm. Now, you've been known to speak out against the use of steroids among weightlifters. What advice do you have for athletes, regardless of their sport, who are using or considering using performance-enhancing drugs?
Well, okay, if you look at my story, now let's go back to the 70s again. In the 70s, if you're competing, you're probably taking steroids. Now, back then, it wasn't illegal. It was pretty much a given. The medical studies, they were probably doing them, but not really promoting them as much as they do today. So what we do know about the time I retired, now all the studies come out. And I thought, well, I'm retired, so I'm not going to take them anymore, so I should be okay. No, that's not the case. 7 years later, I have a massive heart attack. You know, quadruple bypass surgery at age 36, and back in 1989. And so when you have these things, I said, well, let me tell you some of the history. So you talk about the steroids. It goes, that's your problem right there. Whatever disease that you will probably, you know, die from or suffer from later on, it's going to manifest itself a lot earlier on in life. Even though when they brought me to the hospital, this guy could not have had a heart attack because I was in good shape. But now they know. So I tell athletes this, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your body. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. But I will tell you one thing. If you think that taking these steroids is worth risking your health, or you think it's not going to happen to me, think again. Because I will tell you, many of my friends that are dead today, it's a direct relationship from steroid use. And it's just not worth it. I'm one of the lucky ones. I just turned 62. I'm in good health. The doctors don't understand why I don't have symptoms and things like this. And the doctor is very simple. I've had 2 heart attacks and 2 strokes. It's because I take care of myself every day. It's because what I learned early on in bodybuilding and weightlifting about you know health management. Now we do it just without the steroids, and you can still stay very healthy. You can look good. You can be strong.
Very nice. Now, what stands out as one of the most rewarding experiences you've had in the time you've been involved or associated with weightlifting?
You know, it's not. You know, a lot of people would say, "Well, I won this and I won that." That's nice. I mean, that's just that's the accomplishment that you did. But it's not the accomplishment that I did. It's the accomplishment that what I can help other people accomplish. One story I love telling, because this was such a great story. The first gym that I opened was about 1982. It was in La Habra, California. And about the first week, I had this one gentleman walk in, very upset looking. He walked in, I said, "Sir, may I help you?" He goes, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, what would you like to do?" He goes, "The doctor told me if I don't lose 100 pounds, I'm going to die." I thought, whoa, that's really motivating. You know, I said, well, he goes, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Jim, I can try to help you. Now, I can show you what we do. I can show you a plan, both exercise and also nutrition. I don't know if to call it diet, I like to call it nutrition. There's a difference. That I think that over time you'll probably lose the weight if you do it consistently." He goes, "I'll try anything." Okay, so I thought, well, he'll be out of here in about a month. He stuck with it for 4 months. He lost the 100 pounds, and then you couldn't slap a smile off his face. But what was so cool about it is this. Then he comes up to me and says, I just won a bodybuilding show. He came to it. He was really enamored with it now. And then he found out that they have masters bodybuilding for when you're over a certain age, you can compete against your own age category. He goes, "Danny, what do you think if I entered a bodybuilding contest?" I said, "Jim, that'd be the coolest thing in the world. Let's do it." So we got him out there. I taught him to pose and everything. We got him going and everything. And then he said he had so many months in the offing. He goes out, he gets a tummy tuck. Because he had those extra skin. Goes out and buys a brand new shiny Corvette. I mean, this guy was just, for the first time in his life, man, he was so confident. This guy was also a business executive. Now, here's the funny part of the story. He was, his office was one of the big fancy buildings that had all the lawn around it. We've all seen them as you go down the business districts of certain cities. So I helped Jim get a pair of posing shorts, because he needs posing shorts. And so he'd bring his lunch to work every day in a little cooler. So he's getting tan. I says, "Jim, are you going to a tanning booth or what are you doing?" He goes, "Oh no." He goes, "At lunchtime, I go down there the lawn in my Speedos, eat my lunch, and lay out." Okay, all right, good for you, man. And the thing is, he entered a show and he came in third. Now, to me, that was one of the happiest days of my life, to see this guy that saw me 4 months before was worried about dying, and now I can't slap the smile at the face. In fact, I want to say, "Jim, when you do die, you're not going to will me that car, aren't you?" But nevertheless, that's what it does. It's not what it does for me, it's what it does for other people. That's the accomplishment. Is it their education? Is it their health? Is it their self-esteem? Is these young athletes that can play sport and reduce their injuries and everything else and make them feel good about themselves? That's what it does. It makes you feel better, so you'll perform better in life.
That was great. Now, on your website, I saw a quote from you that said, "All it takes is the will to prepare to win." Can you explain that a little bit?
That is actually a quote from Coach John Woodard.
Okay.
Because, we always talk about the will to win. Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, the will to win is one thing. Mm-hmm. And that always sounds nice, sounds romantic, the whole lot of it. That sounds like a great thing. I got the will to win. Mm-hmm. My question is, do you have the will to prepare to win? And when I go back to the bodybuilding days, that's what I think of. Because that takes pure self-discipline, self-denial, and will. That will separate the men from the boys. Not to pick on the ladies, but it does. And so that's why when I heard John Woodard say that, I says, I am always going to remember that. Do you have the will to prepare to win? That's what makes the difference.
That's really awesome.
Ask any doctor, any attorney, anybody in business. When I go see a client, am I prepared to perform for that client? That's what it's all about.
Very nice. Well, thank you, Coach. You've had a lot of great stuff to say.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hopefully we can all take something away from your story. If you want to learn more about the sport of weightlifting or become involved in training or competition, please check out the CSU Fullerton Olympic weightlifting team. Danny also operates World of Weightlifting, the only gym in Orange County dedicated solely to the sport of weightlifting. For hours and more information, please log on to www.dannymcdermott.com. That is all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest, Danny McDermott, once again for joining us. Until next time, I am Casty Jo Fortin. Thank you for watching In Focus.